an actor, and a bunch of listless characters that otherwise would have never been known in the history of this country and would have gone into obscurity, ends up plotting to do something that changes the course of history for many people. Today, we're out on the trail for the pursuit of John Wilkes Booth. Just as the sun comes up out here this morning in Gettysburg, we're out at the site of the 1st Minnesota so that we can tell the story of the 1st Minnesota and one of the soldiers that fought out here at Gettysburg and was wounded. We're also going to try to peel back that story a little bit because it doesn't quite unfold the way a lot of people like to tell it. Minnesota is not the only group out here that's helping in this position. They're just the ones that got the credit because it's a very dramatic story. And that's what people like. They like the drama. Those are the kind of stories I like to talk about. So hopefully we shed some light and bring something new to you here, Gettysburg. I'm out at a location now called the Chancellor House, and the reason why I'm here is because when Hancock's men was approaching the fight that was about to happen over the Battle of the Wilderness, his men took camp out here at the battlefields of Chancellorsville, rather, in and around where the house used to be in the crossroads. Now the house had already been ruined because of a fire, and the fields were ruined because of battle. Farmers were still trying to plant out here, undoubtedly. But the soldiers talked about, when they were camping out here, coming across bleached white bones sticking up out of the ground and skulls. Some of them poked at them and kicked at them and made note of the ominous feeling that they had while they were in and around these fields. Things were a lot different though. It was no longer April of 1863 or May of 1863 either. It was 1864 and things had changed. Union soldiers were starting to write positive things in their diaries and letters about how they felt like they could win this war. Confederate soldiers were starting to talk a lot about hunger, a lot about not feeling so great about what was going on with their army. The tide had changed. But Confederate leadership was still as fervent as ever about whether or not they were going to win. They still firmly believed that they had the opportunity here at the Battle of the Wilderness to change things around. Robert E. Lee himself even wrote that the coming battle, if they lose, they have nothing to live for. But if they win, they have everything to live for. So he placed everything on this battle that was coming. Meanwhile, the soldiers of Hancock's Corps were back here in these fields camping out at Chancellorsville, and one soldier looked at another, an older soldier looked at a younger soldier, and he pointed at the bones at the ground and he told the man, That's what you're headed for just up ahead. He was a veteran, and he knew what he was talking about. It was an ominous warning to the younger soldiers that had not gone into the fray, had not seen the elephant just yet. And they would be meeting it that very next day at the Battle of the Wilderness. If you've ever wondered why Robert E. Lee decided to take his men across these fields out here at Gettysburg on that third day in July, across the open grounds, and attack the point just off over my shoulder here, thinking that it's just complete and total bloody murder, well, we're going to give you the answer out here at the Battle of the Peach Orchard. And that's where I'm at today. The Peach Orchard, Gettysburg, Pennsylvania. Mary Thompson had a house out here in Gettysburg, and it was a very small, modest house where she eked out a life here on the Seminary Ridge, and had small farm plots and things like that. When Robert E. Lee heads into town, he needs a place to stay. He needs a headquarters that's going to be advantageous to himself, and he ends up staying right here at the Mary Thompson house on Seminary Ridge, which turns out to be the perfect place for him to be. He's got a visual in this house right here, all across the fields behind me. He has a visual of the town, and at the time, the town itself doesn't have as many buildings in as it does today. So that's kind of the unique feature out here, and the reason why Robert E. Lee decides to choose this house. Now, in order to really understand where the fight starts for the Peach Orchard, you have to cross the street, go across the fields to where the Confederate line is on Seminary Ridge, right around where the Longstreet statue is at the amphitheater. Now, there's a sign, a wayside marker, that has a hand on it that points in this direction. And it says 3rd Maine and Berdan Sharpshooter. If you go down that road, and I prefer going on foot instead of driving, which is what I'm doing right now, you'll see a wayside marker and a statue. This location is where the first contact was made between the 3rd Maine and Berdan Sharpshooters with that right flank of the Confederates. When they get over here to this position, roughly where I'm at right now, they run right into skirmishers for that right flank. That's the pivotal moment that changes everything for the second day of July. It changes Confederate battle plans, it changes the fight here in these woods, and it changes what happens at the Peach Orchard and the wheat field. Because of the reconnaissance that happens over here, the Confederates now know that they're spotted. They know that the Union soldiers know that they are out in this position. They have to change their plan rapidly, which means they've got to get it together quick and they've got to start coming up with their battle plan and putting them in a position and getting ready to fight, because they're no longer hidden. And so that's what they do. They do counter marches, they do all kinds of stuff to try to get into position. They still think there's a chance to get on them with a surprise attack. And the plan is simply just to sweep across the fields, kind of wheeling a little bit to the left-hand side, all in succession together, and then making their way towards the flank. It doesn't work out that way. Now, if you're a soldier up here on these rocky heights, this is what you're sheltering behind. You've got these large boulders, and you're sandwiched in between these rocks. And generally, they were out in the open anyhow. They didn't come behind these rocks unless they absolutely necessarily had to. But soldiers would shelter in place here, just like anybody with any common sense. Big, large rock, get behind it. Hopefully, I don't get hit by a bullet. This is one of the neat places that you can go to over here near Devil's Den and the Little Round Top and all that, and see stuff like this. All right, so Tom, where exactly would Henry have been located during this battle in front of us here?
About 600 yards away from the house, that tree line over there, where kind of the Longstreet Tower is the marker, a little closer to the road. Those guys, the marker for Taylor's Virginia Battery is there. So if you visit there, you see Taylor's Virginia Battery marker, that's where Henry was, and then they charged across the field toward this house.
And so he actually owned this portion of land that's out front here?
Yeah, his father owned this part. His father also owned a 9-acre rectangular plot right across the road there. In 1850, he transferred that to Henry's ownership. We think he probably felt that Henry was getting some wanderlust, was going to leave, wanted to anchor him here in Gettysburg. So Henry owned that land. There's no record that he ever sold it until 1872. He didn't use it, but he officially owned it. So when they charged across the field, he was not only charging toward the house where he grew up, he was charging over land that he personally owned.
Now I'm out here at a location called the Harper House in Bentonville, North Carolina. John Harper was a Revolutionary War veteran, and he left this homestead here to his wife. They'd actually traveled down from a location near or around Harper's Ferry, today modern West Virginia. When they got here, they had a farm in place, and they had basic everyday life from North Carolina out here, and they probably never expected that a major attack or a major fight was going to happen out here, but their family figured it out soon enough. John Harper and his wife were no longer in the picture at the time that the battle took place here, and his family were left the estate and left the house. This house behind me here directly became a hospital for Union and Confederate soldiers, primarily Union soldiers. I think one of the signs out here mentioned something like 500 Union soldiers were treated in this location. There were about 40 or 50 Confederates that were treated out here. And just directly across the street from where I'm at right now was a cemetery put in place for about 20 to 23 Confederate soldiers that died inside this house here from the Battle of Bentonville. I'm out here in Williamsburg, and I came out to Redoubt number 2 to talk about the location where some of the fighting happened, and kind of give you a perspective of what the terrain looked like when New Jersey rolled into the ravine. Because a lot of the spots out here look a lot like a ravine. And at Redoubt number 2, I saw something that was kind of alarming. If you look behind me here, this horseshoe-shaped patch of ground is an earthwork. Now, the sign details exactly what it is, but the reason why this is alarming is you can see how the concave area is here, and there's a lot of brush that's inside. But if you look up along the top here, it's starting to get really pale in color right up there. Now, that's not because of exposure to the wind and the rain. This is because people are walking on top of it. And it wasn't that long ago, a couple of years back when I came out here, that this was a lot higher than what it is today. Now, I don't know who does this or why they do it. I guess because people are interested in standing on top of mounds of dirt, which is essentially what an earthwork is. But it's emplacements that were put here 160 plus years ago by soldiers. And it's a part of our history. You have to stay off of it. Can't climb on it no matter how cool it looks, and your kids can't climb on it no matter how much they want to. This isn't King of the Fort out here. We're talking about history that's literally, that history is being wiped away right now because it's so exposed with the sun and the wind and the rain hitting it. After people are treading on it, the dirt is crumbling and falling down the hill. There's not much of it left anymore. It's been there for 160 years. It might not last another 10. So, just a reminder to all the people out there. I know most of the people that follow me and go watch my videos, they have a preservationist kind of way of thinking. But if you don't, and you see this video, then kindly keep off of the earthworks. Get close to them, check them out, make videos about them, talk about them, whatever you want to do. Just don't walk on top of them. It's 4:30 in the afternoon on April 9th, 1865. General Grant has just talked to Robert E. Lee at the McMillan house. He's had that conference, the very famous conference that happens there. And as he's riding away from the location where he just met with Lee, he decides to stop on the side of the road. And I'm walking out to the rise in the field right now here at Appomattox, where he actually made that stop. Somewhere out here in this field, he basically pulls his horse off to the side. He sits down and he scribbles on a note. They know it was a rise in the field, and that the sign details the information. And this is the rise in the field here, and I'll flip around so you can see it. Out here in this field, somewhere behind me, is where General Grant stopped to scribble that note. There was no gloating, there was no big celebration. It was a simple note to let Washington, D.C. and the President of the United States know that Robert E. Lee and the Army of Northern Virginia had surrendered here at Appomattox. That note makes its way to Washington, D.C., and by that evening, the bells are tolling and celebration is taking place. The hope of a nation coming back together and a new birth of freedom really takes place right here in this field behind me. Now let's talk about some of the units that fought out here for the Confederacy at the Battle of New Market. Now you have Eccles Brigade Infantry, which is the 22nd Virginia, the 23rd, and the 26th. Then you have Brigadier General Wharton's Brigade, the 30th, 51st, and 62nd Virginia Infantry, and Virginia Mounted. Then you have unattached commands like Augusta Reserves, Rockingham Reserves, Virginia Military Institute Cadets, and then the 3rd Confederate Engineers, Company E. For the cavalry, we have the 18th Virginia Cavalry, the 23rd, the 3rd Battalion of Mounted Reserves of Company A, and that's under John M. Bowdoin. And for artillery, we have Major William McLaughlin, Chapman's Virginia Battery, Jackson's Virginia Battery, McClanahan's Virginia Battery, VMI Cadets Artillery Section. So that's that small piece that that the general asked for when he told them to bring up a couple of artillery pieces. Total engaged out here was about 5,125 Confederate soldiers. Killed were 39, and 495 of them were wounded, and 13 missing, presumed dead or wounded. Some of them probably went back home, no doubt. But for the most part, when someone's listed as missing, they've either run off the field or they've died somewhere out here in these woods and they don't know where they're at. So that's what you have out here for the Confederate side, fighting at the Battle of New Market. April 9th, 1865, Robert E. Lee surrenders the Army of Northern Virginia in Appomattox. Right after that happens, people start showing up at the White House and they start serenading the President of the United States at the White House. The President comes out, thanking the crowd for the singing, tells them to strike up the band song Dixie because it's one of the best tunes he ever heard. And then he tells the crowd he's going to give a speech. He promises that crowd he will give a speech. Then he decides to give a speech on April 11th. John Wilkes Booth happens to be in the crowd that night on April 11th when the president gives the speech. During that speech, the president says some remarks that catches John Wilkes Booth's ears and really pisses him off. Now, to set the stage, if you will, for this actor, what is John Wilkes Booth? Well, he's a well-known actor at that time. He played a lot of villainous characters, and his family is more known than he is. Not only that, but acting wasn't really seen as something that was particularly special before his lifetime. But now, all of a sudden, he's extremely famous, he's a handsome man, and everybody wants a piece of his action. So he's very privileged, if you will. Privileged to do the job that he does. And he lives a pretty decent lifestyle, too. But what else is he? He's a Southern sympathizer for their cause. He's also extremely racist. He believes in the institution of slavery. He believes in the white supremacy ideology. So he's the type of extremist that it would take to full-fledged go into doing something like this. And it sets the stage for what we have happen on April 14th, 1865. So now after those two unsuccessful attempts where Hill and Longstreet weren't able to break the lines, Lee rides up Telegraph Road, and Texas comes out here just in the nick of time, lines up and can see what's happening in front of them. And you have John Bell Hood out here too. Lee looks and asks him firmly, do you think you can break those lines? The only thing John Bell Hood can say at that time is, I will try. And that's exactly what he did. Got his men lined up, and they got ready for the fight so that they would try. $15,000 casualties in a single battle. The largest charge, single charge, that the Confederate Army makes in the entirety of the American Civil War. What place would that be? If I told you it wasn't Gettysburg, you'd probably call me a liar. But it wasn't Gettysburg. It was right here, the Battle of Gaines' Mill. What does Culp's Hill and the 149th New York have to do with Dinwiddie Courthouse here near Petersburg, Virginia? Well, we're going to reveal that here pretty soon. Right here at Dinwiddie Courthouse, we got a story about a man that fought at Gettysburg, survived Gettysburg, but his story takes a drastic turn at the Battle of Dinwiddie Courthouse, March 31st, 1865. I remember I was telling you earlier, going past those brambles and the hill that those guys were facing on the other side of that woodlot when I gave you the orientation. This is the terrain that they're coming up. This is a steep hill. It's not like the small gentle slopes that we were on when we were walking in the wide open spaces out there. So when some of those guys are describing coming up a hill and having to lay down on their face, and then as soon as they come to the top, fire just instantly hitting them. This is what they're talking about. We got out here into the woods so that you could see this for yourself. It's pretty neat. There's a real interesting picture that I've seen of a couple of brothers with the last name Jones. One's name is Adelbert, and the other one is Orlo. Now, Orlo in that picture is wearing a Zouave uniform, and he's with the 146th when he fights up here at Little Round Top. And Delbert, his brother, is with the 97th New York, and he ends up fighting on the other side of the battlefield, away from where his brother is. But nonetheless, they both catch hell on the days that they fight out here. Adelbert is a sergeant when he first comes in to the military. And in 1861, that's when he would start his career in the United States Army. That didn't last very long. Bannister Tarleton never really becomes this Napoleonic figure over in the United Kingdom. His history really is a footnote over there, and he's not nearly as popular over there as he is in the United States. Here in this area, and I can tell you from personal experience, being a kid that grew up in the area, he was seen as the devil. Many of us looked at him like he was the most evil thing on earth, and many tales were told about how Bannister Tarleton would come and get you in the night in your sleep. Silly tales like that. But realistically, Bannister Tarleton was an officer on these fields. He wasn't the devil. He was trying to win battles, and his tactics just were not accepted at that time. He's kind of the Sherman of the British Army, if you think of it. Sherman did the same thing, complete and total warfare. Sherman didn't come from another country to burn houses and crops. He was from the United States, burning houses and crops of people from the United States. He created total warfare too. But Tarleton would go back to England. He would receive a hero's welcome. He would be commissioned to become a general. Eventually, as a young man, he would start graying out pretty early in his life. At the age of 43, I think it was, said that his hair pretty much turned to gray. He ended up having a 15-year on-again, off-again relationship with an author, which wasn't seen as being very popular because it wasn't a wedding or a marriage. He gets elected to a position in Parliament. He's actually knighted, so it's Sir Tarleton to you. And then he goes on to marry his wife, and he dies an old man at the age of 79, I think. So he had a pretty storied life, and he started very young. And regardless of the fact that when he started out, his life was pretty much handed to him on a silver spoon, he did make a life for himself as a grown man. He did very well of it. So now they're in the heat of the battle out here. North Carolina is coming from that direction, Virginia from over my shoulder, Tennessee right there, South Carolina off in this direction, and they're all squeezing up to the top of this hill. They get up here and they start fighting these men, and the next thing you know, they push them so hard that they're starting to get worried, and they start running towards their campsite. which is where I'm headed right now. It's to the saddle of the hill just in front of me. And it's actually where the monument is placed, the largest monument on top of this hill. This is where victory is achieved.
So we're on the south side of Franklin, about 25 miles south of Nashville, Tennessee, and we are at the Carter Farm. This was home to Fountain Branch and Polly Carter prior to the American Civil War. Fountain Branch and their family lived here from about 1829 right on up almost to the turn of the 20th century. By 1896, the last members of the Carter family leave here. But I think the thing that makes this place so special and of such note, and for all the Civil War junkies out there, is what happens here on the afternoon of November the 30th of 1864. Just to my right, looking south, this is where we'll see massive, massive hand-to-hand fighting, chaos, pandemonium, bedlam, as the Confederate divisions of General Patrick Cleburne and General John Calvin Brown crash through the center of the Federal line. All through this area here, major Confederate breakthrough about 200 yards wide, and it is here that men fight hand-to-hand, up close and in person. And right back here behind us, looking back towards our visitor center and extending across the road, brand new soldiers who've never been in combat before. And if you stop for just a second, there are so many people that visit here today, that work here today, that interpret this site. I've never been in combat. I've never even had to fire in anger at anybody before. My goodness gracious life, these young guys out from western portions of Missouri, Federal soldiers, having never seen action that afternoon, are met by two of the strongest divisions in General John Bell Hood's Confederate Army. And they hold on for dear life right back here behind us. The fighting that breaks out here still has tangible scars that you can see today. This is that tactile link to history, right? The thing that you're always looking for. Man, I want to touch it. I want to see it. I want to feel it. I want to be close to it. How much closer can you get than bullet damage done to the south-facing walls of the Carter's brick smokehouse here, or even more so, the wood frame structure of the Carter Farm Office? This building sat in roughly this location on the grounds here the day of the Battle of Franklin, and you can see just the bullet damage looking at the side of it. But as we step inside of it, that's when I think you get a really good grasp of what that combat looked like. And I always remind visitors, guests, friends, people like you that I'm just showing around, I always remind you, this is 5 hours of combat in a war that lasts for 4 years. This is 5 hours, 10,000 casualties, killed, wounded, captured, and missing. This shows you that intensity in a way that I don't think words can accurately describe. I don't think that we could get together on the battlefield and I can talk about, this regiment expended this many shots, this artillery battery fired 400 rounds. That doesn't show it to you quite like this wall can. And I think at the end of the day, you come to a place like this to maybe understand the intensity of the combat. Maybe you want to know something about the family or about the house or about the soldiers. At the end of the day, we all come to these sites, I think, to reflect on what was at stake from the years of 1861 to 1865. The very fate of this American Republic hung in the balance, even in those late days in November of 1864. And there is no better place to reflect on the potential loss of this great experiment in liberty and in self-government, quite like standing on a battlefield of the Civil War, and where better than here at the Carter Farm in Franklin, Tennessee.
Just like the United States Army, United States forces count the cost of this war, The Confederates count the cost of the war the exact same way. Lives lost. Week after week, there's name after name added to a newspaper. Another brother or cousin, uncle, father, all dying in a war. A senseless, brutal war. The American Civil War. And these men knew what they were getting themselves into. There's definitely no mistake in that. And here in Franklin, a lot of the men that died out here with the Confederacy ended up over here in Carnton. Behind me are some of those stones marking the grave of the men that were found out here. And almost every single one of them say unknown. It's kind of amazing to think the Union soldiers suffered the same fate. A lot of them were in marked graves saying unknown. A lot of their families never got to say goodbye. A lot of their families don't even know where they died. They just know they just disappeared. And that was the total cost of an American Civil War. Thousands upon thousands of lives completely snuffed out on both sides of that conflict. Whole generations of people disappearing. Men as young as, well, really not men, boys, 14, 16. Men as old as 55, 60 years old. All on south and northern sides, dying in these fields. But the vast majority of the men that died didn't die from combat. They died as a result of either a wound or some sort of a disease as a result of a wound or sickness in camps. In the end, it's still a terrible loss. Something to reflect on. James Anderson would go on from here pretty much unscathed. Some of his family members weren't as lucky. He had an uncle that was shot out here and killed, and he had another cousin that was wounded. On the other side, he had an uncle by the name of Barron who was with the cavalry that was fighting, and his uncle would come away from here pretty good too. But these family members were fighting each other out here. One south, one north. Both of them from North Carolina. James Anderson would go on to be captured at the Battle of Resaca. After Resaca, he would escape, make his way back to the forces just in time to be down at the Battle of Mobile Bay and Spanish Fort, where he would take a bullet to the chest and be carted off at the end of the war. And then he would be taken prisoner right at the end of 1865 as they were evacuating Spanish Fort. James Anderson would take the oath of allegiance and as a very, very young man go back to North Carolina and live out the rest of his days until he was 78 years of age when he died of a stroke. He has a cemetery in Carolina that's named after him. Now, at the beginning of all of this, I talked about how many people are connected to this stuff and they come out to these fields trying to gain a connection. Well, my connection to Chickamauga is James Anderson because he's my third great grandfather. His uncle is my family too. They were all out here fighting each other for one side or the other for whatever reason that they're fighting. And the Union loses this battle, but secures victory in the war. It's stories like these that I like to tell because I like to bring the connection to people in their lives for this war. I want them to feel more connected to it. And if I can tell the story of the common soldier out here, maybe it brings a little bit something extra to the story itself. It just so happens, though, the story this time is from my very own family. Well, it's been great taking you out here to Chickamauga. I hope you've enjoyed the trip. Just like any other large battle, I can't really do it justice, but I did my best out here to cover the majority of the fighting in some of the more important places so that you can get a brief overview of what it was like fighting here and the outcome itself. Until next time, from right here at the home of the Rock of Chickamauga, it's History with Waffles.